Hello, everyone. I'm Gemma Star. Welcome to another episode of Heart Warriors. This is a series I've been inspired and guided to do thanks to my energetic connection with Kata. Kata is the sacred masculine site in Central Australia, very close to Uluru, which is the sacred feminine site. And it's the energy coming through of these two beautiful sites in Central Australia that are bringing in the union of the masculine and feminine for our beautiful new earth. What I'm here to do is to give a platform to our men to speak of their journey into the heart, to share their challenges, their pains, their highs, their lows, their knowledge, their wisdom, insights, tools, practices. What have they picked up along the way that they can now share with other men and, of course, us women who are walking right there beside them? Today's guest is a man from America. His name is Justin Carpenter. He's a truth seeker, esoteric wizard, very much into diet, fasting, optimal health. So really excited to see where this conversation takes us. So enjoy the show. Hey, Justin Carpenter, how are you?
Hey Gemma, I'm doing really well. Thanks for asking and thanks for having me on.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. I'm really looking forward to this show because I know you're such a wealth of wisdom and knowledge. So, for people who don't know you, who is Justin Carpenter today?
Well, that's a question that I think gets more and more difficult to answer in a short little brief kind of way, but I'll do my very best. I mean, I am, I think we can get stuck in categorizations and labels and things like that. So when people ever try and use those on me, it always falls short to some degree or another because I don't really fit well in any particular category. I am as I am, but as a way to just kind of open up that conversation, I'm a truth seeker. I'm someone who's always been inquisitive. I'm always um, I never settle for just because or that's the way it's always been or any of these kind of things that we tell ourselves to get us stuck into these patterns. I'm a pattern breaker. I'm a rule breaker, not in an unlawful way, but just in arbitrary rules and things that we get stuck in. So I've always been that way, and I joke that sort of one of the first conspiracies that I unraveled was the Santa Claus story that we were told as a kid. My mom, she hated answering questions because I was always asking questions about how it all worked. So you're going to tell me that this guy goes around all these different places. What does he do when they don't have a chimney? How does it? And so they got so tired of answering it. And I was probably 3 or 4 years old. Like I was real little. That they just told me. They told me the answer, and they told me that it was all a story. That I couldn't, probably shouldn't tell my friends or wherever else because they still believed it. But that was kind of an introduction into this way of being and how I can really, it's very polarizing. Questions are always very polarizing in that sort of space. If someone's ready and willing and truly seeking the truth, then they love questions. I love questions. I love being asked questions. I love people who ask questions. I love asking questions. I love all of that because it's this discussion that helps bring us to this space. But you'll find that people that are stuck in their ways or not wanting to really reconsider or look at anything else, they hate questions, or especially people who are stuck in that sort of where they're trying to take advantage of anyone. Questions are something that they don't want to have at all. So I'm a very polarizing character in that I'm always asking questions. I'm very insistent on this moral compass that we have where we're very programmed into this right and wrong, and we know when things are wrong. We know when somebody or something is being taken advantage of, and I have no problem pointing it out. I have no problem pointing it out in anybody anywhere. So that's kind of, it's always an interesting thing because people either really love me or they really don't like me at all. There's not really much in between, and that in between is growing smaller and smaller. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. I mean, I'm happy to get into any more detail on anything in particular, but that's me in a nutshell.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, well, we'll see where the conversation takes us. So let's start with little Justin. Very inquisitive there. That was a great story about Santa. What would you say was the most challenging part of your childhood?
The most challenging part, well, and this is a question that in and of itself, I struggle with, because I didn't have a whole lot of challenges or trauma growing up. I had about as good as you could have it, within the 3D space of how that looks. And there wasn't anything where it was extraordinary in any capacity, but my parents very much loved each other. They very much loved us. They raised us well. I had a good family. I went to good schools. I never really had any like traumatic or super negative experiences as you go along that way. Um, but that aspect right there was something that I struggled with later on in life. I've always found a really easy time relating with people. I always really see, like I say, I see the highest expression of everyone. I always see that highest expression, no matter what, no matter how much people try and hide it or pretend it doesn't exist or pretend they're not that highest expression. I always see it very clearly. So I love helping to guide people to that expression, because when they light up, I light up. So it's this beautiful relationship that I love to share with others. But through that, if I ever have any um, offering to share with anybody, a perspective to add, a lot of times that was a challenge in portraying it, because they would say, well, how do you know? You haven't been through anything. You haven't been through anything. Your life's been peachy. Your life's been easy. How could you know any of this? So that was actually a struggle that I had, of just like how to answer that question, or how to even be okay with myself, not feel guilty for what I had. So that was something that, I did a lot of work on to try and address that. And it really, I came at such peace with it when I realized why I had all these things. And it truly was to show people what's possible, to show people what is it like when you don't have trauma as your initial sort of thing to grow off of. What is it like when you're given every opportunity to grow into what you want to be and do what you want to do? Now, sure, I've had to work hard, and it's not like I've been handed everything, but overall, like the path has been laid for me to accelerate and to be the best version of myself I can possibly be. And that's where we should all be, right? Like that's the starting point where we should all get to where every child born into this space knows no trauma. There's no trauma even as a part of it. And so the learning becomes so much more constructive, instead of this, there's learning through trauma and there's learning through pain and suffering, but it's a much less efficient learning. It's not as fun to do. It doesn't work nearly as well, and it takes longer. So I'd rather learn in the way where we're continually growing, where we're expanding in that sort of way. So yeah, overcoming that challenge of just really being okay with the fact that I didn't have a lot of trauma growing up, and still knowing that I can't speak on these things, because the best part is it's all the same. We all go through the same stuff. You really start to unravel this story that we all go through, and the stories we tell ourselves, to try, because we want to identify with our story and we want to make them unique, and they are unique, but the elements from them are all the same. So when you start to unravel, then, and when we start to have these open and authentic discussions, which is one thing that is so amazing about this channel and this series, is this cultivating that discussion, cultivating that space to where we can come and share, our struggles, or the things that we've been through, and do so in a way where it's constructive and we're learning and we're all gaining from it. So then my challenges or my overcomings or my shortcomings or whatever it is can be the same or similar to somebody else's. And by putting it out there, we're all learning and growing in an accelerated fashion without necessarily having to go through the same level of hardship. And that's this maximizing efficiency on learning. And that's what we're supposed to do. And that's why, Charlie Freak, who had a fantastic episode on this series, he loves talking about the game of golf and how divine that game of golf is, because the goal of that game is to make it into the hole with the least amount of strokes. So you're wanting to be as efficient as possible. And you can only do that when you're not in your head, when you truly are just in the flow, and you let that swing happen organically without trying to force anything. If you try and force it, it's going to go all over the place, and it's not going to work. So it's that same sort of space where we just need to be so present, so in the moment, but focused on getting that hole in one, always focused on maximizing our efficiency. And God will always present those ways to maximize our efficiency. But when we are in that flow, we will always fall into that space. So that's something I love to do, is just find the best way to reach people, the best way to spread this message and do anything really, the best way to do it, because and then we can share it and all gain from that together. And then naturally the best ideas always rise to the top. So this is what we're moving to, is this
Yeah.
meretricious, everything good rises to the top. So yeah, that's that.
Yeah. I want to get your insights into someone who's maybe watching and saying, okay, well, lucky you had a, great upbringing. But what about me? I was born into abusive parents. There was violence, there was poverty. Why me and why you?
Sure. Well, that can be a potentially triggering topic if somebody's still identifying with the circumstances or the aspects of this particular experience we're having. And that's one thing that the cabal, or those who like to control this system, really want us to really attach ourselves to this particular identity, to this particular experience that I'm having, and pretend like my life is just that. It's just one kick of the can, you die, and that's it. And when we have this sort of short-sighted perspective, we're not able to really zoom out and see why else might something happen. What else am I supposed to gain from this? And it's difficult to portray to someone who has been through a lot of trauma, but the same fundamental truth always applies. There is nothing that happens for no reason. Everything is for this continual growth. Everything is happening for us, not to us. It's the difference between being a victim or being a victor. Society likes to program us to be victims, that we're always bound to the whims of everything around us. We're just the products of our environment. We can do nothing about it whatsoever, which is not the case. We are powerful in each and every moment, and we have complete ability to change everything within that moment. Maybe not physically in that moment, but change our perspective of it, which does change everything and ultimately does manifest physically as well. So people who have, experienced, trauma growing up, it's not to say that you've done anything wrong or you deserve to have this kind of thing, but we do have to recognize that we fell into this space of it's horrific what's going on around us. It's horrific to see the conditions that people have to grow up in, and the trauma that does happen just by the system and by what it creates. It's a system designed to create trauma. And the only reason we got to this space was because we were so complacent. We were so unwilling to stand up and say no. This has been coming at us for generations now at this point. And so when you truly know that there's no such thing as death, death is just a part of this cycle if you so choose it. It doesn't have to be, but it is. So when you're not bound to this one lifetime aspect, and you realize that we've always been here, this has always been us. We just really, really conked ourselves across the head really badly to get to this space, to where we forgot all of who we are and what we're capable of. But that's the truth of it. We've always been here. So the only reason we're experiencing the things that we are right now is because we needed to, in order to not experience them ever again. We need to create a space where there is no suffering. That should be the goal of every single being that comes into this space ad infinitum, is to make sure that their efforts are to reduce suffering as much as possible, both within themselves and within others. And so when we have that baseline stance, when everyone has that conviction, then all of that trauma goes away, all of that suffering goes away. But we're stubborn. So if we don't learn the easy way, then we have to learn the hard way. And this is us choosing to learn the hard way. This is us choosing to allow the system, the whole, everything to fall into this level of mess, so that we have to, unfortunately experience the consequences of those decisions. And, as hard as it is to see sometimes, I'd always recommend people just zooming out. If your independent individual circumstances are too difficult to rationalize or see why, really try and zoom out, really try and see from a larger perspective what's going on here and what is happening here. And don't be so attached to this one identity that you have. I mean, yes, this is an important role to play, and you should play it as best as you can, because that's why you're here, what you're here to do. but don't attach yourself to it as if it's the end all be all, and that you're just a victim to everything around you and all this other kinds of stuff. So that would kind of be my response. I mean, I'd gauge it based on how and I love engaging on that topic too, because it is a hard one. It's a difficult one. And that's the space where I love to be the most, are those difficult topics, because that's where our focus needs to be. The only reason we got into this mess is because there were things happening and people were just like, don't worry about that. Don't worry about what Uncle Jimmy did to the little boy or whatever. Don't worry about any of that. Like, let's not talk about it. We're just going to pretend that doesn't exist because I don't want to deal with it. That's what got us into this mess. So my focus is always right where we need to be, which is the space where the least amount of people want to be. That's the space where I will be.
So I'm interested, Justin, for people who want to know more about reincarnation, karma, what are there any particular books you would recommend as standing out? Because I know you've studied a lot of this stuff, if I'm correct.
Yeah, well, I have studied quite a bit, but my studies usually are not as much in the in the book space. I mean, I have read some good books, but not necessarily on reincarnation. That has more been just esoteric wisdom, looking through. I mean, YouTube used to have a ton of great stuff, but all of that's a bit kind of gone away. And there are definitely spaces out there where you can find a lot of good stuff. I've recently been looking at TikTok recently. I had never gotten on TikTok before, but I've been trying it, and it takes a while to kind of get away from the garbage that you initially get from it. But once you kind of refine and start following and liking people that are actually speaking about this esoteric wisdom, and I mean, there's a lot of great stuff on there. I'm finding people that are talking about sacred sex, talking about flat earth, talking about all these different areas, which you don't normally find quite easily, especially in the social media space. These are very triggering topics that people don't really go into, and it's areas where the cabal has purposefully kept hidden for a long time. So the fact that this stuff is so readily there means the veil is lifting, means that we're moving out of this space of being enclosed into it, and this information is readily available for all right now. It is, and so you just have to go find it. So that's where I'd suggest, is not necessarily TikTok. I mean, you can look there. YouTube's great, but it does. You just kind of have to be open to it. You have to be open to searching and really dig in deep in a lot of different areas, and then truly, the space where you don't have to go anywhere is realizing that we know everything. There's nothing that we don't know. We're remembering. And so it's really important to remember that. It's really important to remember that fundamental aspect. We know everything. We just forgot. We forgot all of this, and we forgot it because parts of ourselves really wanted the rest of us to forget it completely, so that we would be really good slaves for them. And so as we start to remember, it starts to make a lot more sense. And so that's where I really put all the pieces together. Is just this intrinsic, inherent truth that we all know. And once you start to build that platform, once you have that strong foundation, then every piece that you add to it, it has to fit perfectly within that space. Once you've established your foundation, and that's your foundation, you have no doubt about it whatsoever, then everything else should fit, because that's the way that truth works. If as soon as you have some pieces fit together, everything else should fit. And if it doesn't, there's a discrepancy. And either we got everything wrong with our foundation, which until we're sure, we should be willing to revisit that, or that new piece of information is incorrect. So with this knowing of kind of how the creation is set up, and how and helping, what really helps is learning how magnetism works. That's a really fundamental aspect to how this whole creation works as well, because then you start to learn how magnetism never ends. You can have a magnet on your refrigerator for thousands of years and it would still be there. It would still be doing the exact same thing. So this is this perpetual energy that they try and hide from us, this etheric magnetic energy that they try and hide from us. And we're a part of this etheric energy. We're just a more physical manifestation of this light energy that makes up everything. I mean, all of this within this creation is just light projection manifest physically. And so we're here to do that. And when you realize that that's how this system works, and it's a closed system, so that we're here protected by God's firmament, and it's an enclosed system. There's nothing that comes in or out of it except for um, likely through enough spiritual elevation to go up through the top, or enough spiritual degradation to kind of fall out the bottom. These are the only two ways in or out, and this is this ascension process, is going up or down within this frequency range. And so we came from a much higher frequency, I mean, all the way up to the very top, which was singularity, and then we've been falling all the way down to this point. And hopefully we've got it in us to say, I don't want to fall anymore. I'd rather turn around and start going the other direction. That's the hope, and that's the idea behind this great awakening and what we're witnessing. um, so that's kind of why reincarnation makes sense, because we're all energy, and so that energy is never going to go anywhere. And so our what we are is never going to go anywhere. We are consciousness. We're not this physical body. We're not this this meat suit that we walk around in. That's not me. I am the observer. I am consciousness inhabiting this body. And so knowing that, and knowing that consciousness is everything and it never ceases, this just makes the idea of reincarnation that much more rock solid. And if it doesn't make sense, then I suggest just continuing to look into these sort of baseline structures. Look into magnetism, look into the energy flow, and how and really ask yourself, why is it that nobody teaches magnetism? Why is that nobody talks about it? Why is there no university out there that you can actually learn about this kind of stuff? Well, because it's the secret to everything. Once you have the base building blocks, then it's as above, so below. That's how God works. It's this, you take the smallest pattern and then it expands outward. So when you really get the magnetism aspect, then you see how this whole creation works and how everything fits in between. I don't know all the details of how everything fits together, what it actually looks like when we die, or how that appears within our consciousness. But I do know that it's very, very much here. And you can find other examples too of, like kids who will remember where somebody is buried that nobody should know, and it just happens to be that that was them in a previous life, and they had these memories, and there's no way that anybody would just do that. And so there's plenty of examples out there. Most of them have been very kept under wraps, because again, if you create a system where everyone believes they only have one kick at the can and they're going to die, they're a lot easier to control under threat of death. That's a very easy way to steer people if they think this is the only one you got. So that's just a very easy lie to push to keep us from realizing who we are, which is that we are just an aspect of this one infinite creation. So we are as we have access to all of that which it is, and at any point. But you don't make a very good slave if you know that. So they don't like us knowing that part.
Oh, the great explanation. Thank you. Let's jump to your adulthood then. What would you say was the deepest, darkest moment of that?
Deepest, darkest. Well, I've always been a romantic. So my hardest moments have always been the heartbreak, the going through. um I love very deeply, and so when those moments are realized where the relationship cannot continue in that sort of capacity, it's always very difficult. At least to me, it always seems like that pain is the worst. So when I was when I was living in Seattle, I got married to an absolutely beautiful, wonderful woman, and we had a great time. We had a wonderful time meeting and coming together. And I say this, because we ended up getting divorced, but I hate using that term divorce because it's such a loaded term, because I really couldn't have picked a better woman to have realized, hey, we want to get married, but then we like, oh, we did that way too fast. What are we doing? We don't really know each other that well, and we don't really vibe in a lot of areas. But we came to that together. We came to that on the same page. So the separation was, it was very painful, but it wasn't like the over dramatized sort of event where that you see or hear about. And but within that moment, I just remember the last time driving away from her place, and I was heading back from Seattle, and I was going to go back to Tennessee, which is where I grew up, and spent some time there with my parents. And I just remember driving away and like just overwhelmed with tears and crying, and just because it's like a death. It's like that. It's the death of that relationship, that aspect that you had. And so I had to pull over on the side of the road, and I'm just weeping and crying. And this woman pulls up next to me, and she's like, "Are you okay?" And I said, I was like, "Yeah, I'm okay." But she could see, obviously, I wasn't, I wasn't happy. I was crying. And so she got out of the car, and she said, I don't know. Um, I just feel like I need to say this to you. Would you like a hug? And I'm your angel today. And she said that. And that moment, I mean, like, if I didn't have this, just, I was pretty good with God at that point, but that took it to a whole nother level of just like, he is totally with me 100%. I have nothing to fear, no time where I feel without. He is with me. And so that was, one of those moments where I can, and I'll say this to others as well. And again, it's hard because maybe I haven't been through the traumatic experiences that some might have been through, but I do know that one thing that really helps with those feelings of just immense sadness is the appreciation for how beautiful it is to get to feel so deeply, to get to experience something where you love and you miss, or you're sad, or you just feel so deeply, even if it's momentary, even if it's just for a second. But the fact that we get to have the depth of this experience to feel those kinds of feelings, and allow for the new heights that come after it. Imagine how boring this would be if we didn't have that. Imagine how just lame that would be if we didn't have all of it. We didn't have all the ups and downs, and even those valley floors where it feels like everything is just, all is lost, or you have nowhere else to go. It's in those moments where God reaches and he says, "Hey, I got you. I always got you. I always had you." And we feel that. And that's what Charlie talks about, is the eucatastrophe. It's that moment where you can really turn the ship around in some capacity or another. We have to hit that point to say, you know what, I'm tired of falling. I'm tired of being miserable. I'm tired of being sad. I'm tired of whatever the case may be. But that perspective shift is really what allows this vibrancy of an experience. The emotions that we can have really do add such color to this. Um it's like the creative palette that we get to paint this experience with, and to learn to tame, because they can be, it's not something to just let run amok. It's like our ego is tied to our emotions. And so when we're not in the driver's seat, and we're not recognizing that we are not those emotions, we are just experiencing those emotions, they can kind of take us off into whatever kind of space where we're apt to do anything. But if you truly do see them for what they are, which is just a gift, it's a gift to give us this texture. It's a gift to give us this drive and this passion. You don't let it take over, but you let it just add that vibrancy, add that color, add that experience, add that feeling, and then sink in into the further memory, which is adding to that collective experience even more so. Then it just makes every moment, it helps to make every moment be appreciated, even those where it feels really dark and heavy, because you're like, wow, even in this space, I'm still feeling very deeply. And that's still pretty cool. Even though this one I don't really want to do anymore, I can transmute this. And this is what, alchemy is truly about, is transmuting any emotional energy into that creative force, into that creative oomph that we need to make do and make happen. So that would be a moment where I felt a lot of sadness and emotion, and kind of came out of it. But yeah, that'd be kind of an experience to share that on that one.
That was beautiful. Thank you. How
You're welcome.
long do you think it took you to get over the worst of that? And what was your process, like your practical process to work through those emotions, from sadness to, would you say, acceptance, or how would you phrase the emotional journey?
Yeah, acceptance is a good space for it, because it is about contentment. It's not that you necessarily relish or want the feelings to continue, but just being content with where you are, being content with the moment, being content with what's happening. um I mean, I'd say it came and went for periods of time. Sometimes it would be gone for a while, and then it would hit you again, and you'd feel that intense sadness. And but even in those practices, it was a good moment to just really feel those feelings and let them be as they are. And I think that's what helps me deal with anything at all, is not fighting. Don't fight anything. Don't fight anything that comes up. Don't try and push it aside. Don't negate it. Don't pretend it's not there. Don't pretend it's all love and light and you just forget about any of the pain and the sorrow and the sadness. That is far worse. That is far worse in the long run for not addressing things. So always confront, always be with, just observe and be with whatever we're feeling. um so that really helped me deal with that, and it helps me deal with lots of things. It's just never moving away from a space of discomfort. I've started to reprogram myself to get really excited when I'm in discomfort, when I'm feeling something where I'm like, I don't want to do this, or I don't like this, or anything in that capacity. I'm like, okay, this could be something really good here. Usually when I have these feelings, it means that I'm being invited to let go of something. It usually, well, I shouldn't say usually, it always means I'm being invited to let go of something. If I'm feeling discomfort, it means I'm being invited to let go of something, because I'm holding on to something that is keeping me from elevating to a new height. And so I can either choose to hold on to it and to stay at that level and experience the sort of round and around experience. Because if we don't address something in one moment, it doesn't go away. It doesn't go away. We just have to do it again, and it gets worse. So it's best to address them. It's best to just stick with whatever sort of aspect comes up, whatever is being revealed to me. And this goes back to earlier on in the conversation, where you have this flip between victim and victor, where I'm just a product of everything around me. I'm bound to it. I can't do anything about it. Um, or viewing yourself as the victor, where everything's happening for you, because that's the truth. Everything is happening for you. So if you can really recognize that and see, oh, this is happening for me. I don't like how this feels right now, but it's still happening for me. Even though I don't like how it feels, it's still happening for me. And even though I might not be able to see the reasons why it's happening, I know, because I trust God has the highest and best perspective. I know that it's happening for that reason, in order to lead me to a space of greater good. Because that's ultimately all God ever leads us, is to be in that space of maximum creative potential, to always be moving towards that space of maximum creative potential. So everything that we experience is all designed for that same purpose. Everything, every aspect that we experience is designed for that same purpose. And even if it's hard to see in that moment, usually the harder it is to see, the more we have to work through in order to get to that space where it becomes more clear, because we've been stubborn somewhere along the way. When it's really uncomfortable, it means we've been really, really stubborn and not listening, because he always starts at the gentlest way. He always starts in this space of just like, hey, there's some darkness over here.
Nudge.
Here's a little
Then it's
nudge.
a push, then it's a
Yeah,
kick,
exactly,
then
exactly.
it's a
Until he's
drop of brick on your head.
exactly. And so if we can really get that, and that's why being present, you win. You've won if you're in the now. It's the flip of that word, one now. If you're present, you're winning, because when you're aware and you're paying attention to those nudges, then it's so much easier to see, because you get the lesson right then and there, when it's just a little nudge, and he's just like, hey, there's a little aspect of frustration within you that you're not seeing, but here's an opportunity, here's an event that happened that's going to drive you into that space of knowing, okay, here's an area that I'm holding on to, here's an attachment that I have. Every attachment that we have is holding us down. So the more we let go, and this is why surrender is such a continual theme within this, because we have to let go. He's just asking us, he's like, hey, trust me. I got you. I promise. I've always had you. I will always have you. I'm always going to lead you to that space of maximum creative potential. And only I can see it as clearly as I do. So you can try and go off on your own and plan and plot and create a space and force it and do all these other sorts of things. But that doesn't work nearly as well. We might piece it together and figure out some ways to get there. And we always do, because even in those moments we're experiencing and sort of playing with um the karmic laws of stepping outside of God's will, stepping outside of this beautiful eternal energy that's always moving. And so if we're not in flow with that, then we're inevitably going to flow against it at some point or another. And anytime you're flowing against the divine flow, it's bad news. It's not going to work,
Yeah,
I promise.
yeah, for
But that
sure.
experience is yeah, but that experience is for us to have as well, if we so choose. But like I said at the beginning, it's all about being in that flow, being in that now, so that I can truly hear where God is nudging me, where are those spaces where I can improve on and learn from, so I don't have to get to the spaces where it's really uncomfortable. So yeah, all about
Yeah,
efficiency.
right. Now, just to clarify, are we talking about a religious God or a spiritual God? What's your definition of God that you're speaking of?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, religion, it was designed as the antithesis of God. And this was a big part of my realization coming to as well. I very much grew up in the church. My father was a minister. Never had any negative experiences within the church or anything like that, but it just never felt whole. It never felt like there was much to it. It was kind of like this, people just got into these repetitions and just went to church every Sunday, and that's it. And they were good. And that's all God really wanted. And to me, that just never fit. It never felt right. It never felt, I never really liked going to church. I never really liked that whole experience. And then when I was, in my teenage years, that's when I started looking into different conspiracies. It's when I looked into the truth about 9/11 when I was about 15 or 16 or so. Um, and it wasn't long after that I found the truth about the Catholic Church and just all the atrocities that they've been doing. So I kind of tied the church with that. And then I kind of tied God, or my idea of God, with that as well. So I kind of went away from God, my idea of God. I went away from the church, and I was agnostic for a period of time, probably my early 20s, late teens, early 20s. I would classify myself as agnostic. I was like, I don't know what this all is. I don't know how we got here. I don't know, but I know that I don't ascribe to that, whatever that was. So I'm going to go find my own way. And, went through, got into the kind of like more new age kind of spiritual aspects, but didn't really vibe with a lot of that either. And then I don't know exactly at what moment it was. It was likely, I know I had some pretty profound experiences experimenting with psychedelics and things of that nature. Those were definitely some really powerful moments of using plant medicine to kind of come back into that, even if it wasn't necessarily intentionally as such. It did have a good way of bringing you back into that space of centeredness and recognizing that we're all one. There is no separation. Separation is the illusion. That became very clear to me. That just stuck. Like, it was just like, this makes total sense. And then everything started to make sense after that. And then it became the space of like, oh, God is everything. God is me, God is you, God is all of this together. Not that me individually, I am not God, but I am part of that one consciousness that we are all a part of. And so as soon as I stop trying to put God in a box, and because that's what the church likes to do. They like to put God in a box and say, God is only this way. He's some judgmental white dude sitting on a cloud way off in space, millions of miles away. And he doesn't really pay attention to us much because he never listens to our prayers, but but he judges us very profusely. So if you step outside of his judgment, he's going to judge you and you're going to go to hell. But don't worry, because if you just believe in this one guy and you pay us your money, even though you only have one life, you've only got one kick of the can. Don't worry, your soul is going to be saved because we say it is, because we talk to God. You can't talk to God. Don't try to talk to God. We can talk to God, but don't worry, we got you. We got your back. So that's the lie pushed by the church and how they create this religion version of God, religiosity and all of it. But that's the antithesis of God. That's the exact opposite. And so that's where I really came back into that that comfort of knowing is like, God never left me. I realized that. Like God never left me. He was always there. And I say he, it's he, she, it's all encompassing. There's no gender. It's just it's just easier to say without, without, but I realized that he was always there. He was always there with me. And I just had to kind of rediscover and go my own way, and also realize that the church was not it. And then you start reading the Bible for yourself, because I'd gone to Sunday school, I'd read some of the Bible, but I never really read it intensively until I met Charlie Freak and started going through the Bible decode series we did, where we decoded the book of Matthew and the book of Revelation. And those were both just amazing opportunities to really go through and see what was Jesus actually saying. And anyone who goes through and reads the books for yourself. Now, granted, there's a lot of distortions within the Bible, especially the Old Testament. But if you go through and read the New Testament for yourself, it's very clear to see that Jesus did not say anything about going to churches. In fact, he told his disciples not to look at the churches because they'll all be dust. This is not what we're supposed to do. We're not supposed to pay anybody to tell us what God is telling us about ourselves. It's about cultivating that connection within. The kingdom of heaven is within. The temple is your body. This is what we're supposed to keep sacred. This is why every moment should be reverent. It should be sacred. But and everywhere we go, that's church. Every encounter that we have with another, that's that communion that we have. This is this uniting of souls that we can do continuously, and always be celebrating each and every opportunity to do it, because it's another aspect of consciousness that has gone through its own unique journey to get exactly to where it is. Like, wow, I'm getting to talk with another one right now. That's a miracle. Like, that's an absolute miracle. And by having this deliberation and sharing and discussing and doing that, then we're just helping to cultivate those connections. Whereas everything in organized society is designed to disconnect us, is designed to take us away from who we are, and disconnect us from each other, disconnect us from ourselves, disconnect us from God, and so everything that we do to connect otherwise, that's the work. That's what Jesus was teaching, was this way, this one path to follow. But it's not just the one that's written in the Bible. It's not just the one that's taught about by the Christian religion or anything like that. It's the same path. It's the same way that every ascended master has ever walked and ever will walk, because it's the only way to do it. It's all about walking this straight and narrow path of righteousness and being virtuous in each and every moment, staying aligned, staying balanced, not being offended by anything, not falling into that space to where you're easy to dip into all sorts of emotions and be steered any which direction. It's about cultivating that connection with God so that you walk with no inhibitions. You walk with no limitations on God's will. So God's will can work through you in the best way possible. And he demonstrated that. Jesus Christ demonstrated that by saying, you know what, if I have to die, okay, I'm still going to do it. I'm still going to walk this path. If that is a part of my journey, absolutely I will do it, because I know that God's will is the highest good. And why would I ever try and conflict with that? But of course, you read the text, and there were moments where he had his hesitations, where he was fearful, just like anybody would, because he's a man. He's a man who walked this space but activated the Christ within, which is what we all have within us. There is no separation. There's no, oh, only you people can be Christed and you people cannot. We all have this energy within us, and it's very much a tangible thing. It exists physically as the chrism oil. It exists energetically as the kundalini, or this energy chakra system highway. All of it exists to activate ourselves fully, so that we can walk and create in the space in the best way possible.
I love it. Where can people find that decode series of the Bible that you did?
Yeah, so that is still, I believe it's on Charlie Freak's Rumble page, or you can go to my website. So rumble.com /c/ Charlie Freak, because that's C for channel. So rumble.com /c/ Charlie Freak, all one word. You can find his channel, and you should be able to find most of them there. An easier spot to find him is on my website, justincarpenter.org. And if you just search for Bible or Bible Decode, you can find the post I made on it, which has all of them listed in one post. So it's just an easy way to link through and go through each one. They were absolutely fantastic. We had some audio issues. Like, I'd love to go back and do them over again. But and especially like it was over a year ago now at this point, so I've learned so much more. But it was amazing because we had, especially at the beginning, we had myself and another woman we used to do shows with, Marie and Charlie, and so Marie and I would give our best take on what was written as we'd go through the passages, and then Charlie would come with just a grand slam, knock it out of the park, like, oh, you did, that was good, guys, that was nice, you saw some surface level stuff, but here, let me really dig deep into what's being written here. And that's the great part about that book, is there's so many layers to it. You know, it's not just a one-time literal way of reading it, which is another, you know, falsity that the church pushes, is that this is just a historical book. It just happened one time, a really, really long time ago, but it has nothing to do with you. You know, don't worry about any of the stories. Don't worry about any of the characters. That's all it is. But that's not the truth. It did happen physically. It happened literally, but it also happened, it's happening allegorically as well. It's a metaphor. It's something to sort of integrate, to take in, and, you know, embody, so we really see kind of who we are and what we have to uh really supposed to be. um can we pause the recording just a second?
Sure.
Sorry, I really have to use.
We're back.
All right, so awesome. So just to finish up the thought, you know, the Bible really is, it gives us, it's this living text that represents us. It represents every aspect of ourselves, you know. So you take the every character within it and you replace it with an aspect of you. So it's your left brain versus your right brain. It's your ego versus your higher self. It's the devil versus God. You know, everything is within you. And so when you can read the book in this sort of space, it takes it away from just being this literal dead words on a dead page, but you breathe life into it. And that's all, you know, that's all Jesus was trying to do, was just embody this story so that we really integrated it, so that we really took it on and recognized that that's who we are. It's not just something that existed a long time ago. It's us. It's always been us.
Yeah, and I could ask so many more questions on that aspect, you know, like when did religion come in and all that, but let's bring it back to masculinity. What's your definition of a healthy masculine man in 2022?
Well, it's roughly the same. The healthy masculine is roughly the same, but obviously the circumstances would be far different. And so just really examining, okay, what is a healthy masculine energy? What should this embody? And um, you know, I heard a really good visualization before that I really enjoyed, and it was, you know, because it's easy it's sort of easier to compare the masculine if you have both the masculine and the feminine, because they're these they're necessary for each other. They're very different, but they're, you know, they complement each other quite well. So one sort of metaphor for the masculine and the feminine is the masculine is the head, but the feminine is like the neck. So the masculine is this, it's a very strong, stable driving force. So it's something that you, once you have your bearings straight, you want to go head first, and you're going full force in that direction. It has that power to sort of break through. It has that power to stay consistent. It's not wavering. It's very strong, steadfast in that. Um, Whereas the feminine energy is the neck. She provides that. She's the energetic flow. She gives that perspective. She's always willing to engage with every possibility, every decision, every choice, and so she weighs them all quite well. And so if the feminine does not have the masculine, then she's going all over the place. She doesn't know which ways, left or right, up and down. She has a difficult time staying grounded and staying focused.
Like a
But
chook with his head cut off. That's what we
yeah,
say in Australia. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, but if the masculine does not have the feminine, then he's very stubborn, and he can run himself into a brick wall over and over and over again, or go in some direction where he's so far off course, he's not even going where he needs to go anymore. He has no willingness to change, and that's where we can get stuck in these repeating cycles where we're we're not even examining. So this is kind of, I like that example of the masculine and feminine and what they provide for each other, because it's not only true within a relationship, within a partnership where you're acknowledging these gifts that we each have, but it's also within us as well. We all have these masculine and feminine energies within us. Those of us who are physically masculine tend to have more masculine energy within, so it's something to focus on more and embody more. Um, but the balance has to be there within. So if I'm finding myself too stubborn or driven or unwilling to take on criticism or see new perspectives, that's an unhealthy masculine aspect coming out of me, and I need to invite my feminine care, compassion, openness, that sort of energetic change and shifting acknowledgement to balance that out. So that's kind of, just an overall view of these two inherent forces, and really respecting what they are and recognizing that they each have a very, very important role to play. And it's not to take away, it's not to pretend like it doesn't exist, it's not to try and be the wash of two and not even utilize either. It's about to have both of them working in harmonious balance. So a true masculine embodied force within this space, within 2022, would be appalled at the current situation of what's going on, because the other role of the masculine is this defender, is the protector. It's to recognize that the front lines, or the outer exterior or whatever of this guarding, because ultimately we are born into this space with the most precious thing, and we always have the most precious thing, which is our innocence. It's our purity. It's that divine light that is so untarnished, untainted by the world. It's so connected to the divine, connected to all, and it has to be protected. But this is the very thing that sparks that creative energy within us. And it's also the very thing that the left brain, the cabal, the parasitical aspect of self, it needs to harvest. It needs to take, and it needs to steal, and it needs to try and rape and pillage and whatever else. So recognizing this structure and how this works, the masculine always needs to be in that space between what is out there trying to harvest and take that purity. So they need to be on that defensive lines, ensuring that is completely and 100% safe. And so you look around, I don't know of any place really where kids can go play out at midnight with absolutely no worry whatsoever that they'll be okay. There's nowhere, not that I know of this space where that exists here now. And the fact that that doesn't exist means that we have a lot of wrong to address. We have a lot of nasty parasitical aspects of ourselves that are willing to take advantage of others and take advantage of that purity. And so it's very easy to see what's happening to the women, what's happening to the children, what's happening to the elderly. These are all those who by no fault or nothing. This is just the balance of how it is. But these are those who are less physically capable of defending themselves. They're less physically able to take care and ward off these attacks, and they are also more so holders of this purity, this sacred innocence, this sort of right to be protected, and this is the space that it is. And so a healthy masculine should be looking for anywhere where that is not being met, anywhere where this safety is not preserved and this safety is not allowed to come to fruition. And that's where the focus should be. So, I'd say to anyone who's striving to be in that space, the first one was, we have to start speaking out about all the stuff that's going on where that's not aligned with that. And if it's not aligned with that, then we don't be quiet until it is. We don't settle until that is addressed. And that's the sort of warrior aspect that always has to be there, to say, hey, there's people being taken advantage of. And if there's people being taken advantage of, then I'm not doing my job. I'm not doing what I'm here supposed to do. There are things that are completely unaddressed. And it is not saying that a woman can't can't operate in that space of protector as well, because they're very much guardians of the inner circle. They're guardians of that tighter space, the family. They protect the family, whereas the man, the masculine, protects the community, protects the larger border. She protects the home. So within those two roles, you really do establish that sense of safety, and within that space of safety, that's when the creativity can really flow, because the purity, the innocence, feels safe to come out. If it doesn't, then it doesn't come out, and it stays locked away. It stays in that fearful state. It can't create. So we can't create. If our inner child doesn't feel safe to come out, it won't. And so we won't create. And it's
Yes.
as simple as that. So if that's that, that's kind of the gist on what masculine focus
Yeah.
should be
Yeah.
on right here and now. Yeah.
I love that. And in your opinion, so would you describe a healthy masculine, another phrase being a divine masculinity? And where was that hijacked along the way? What happened that, you know, that isn't the natural, maybe state of most men today?
Well, it's a compound issue, because every aspect, as I mentioned, of organized society is designed to disconnect us and take us away from who we truly are and what we're here to do. So men are trained to be not like men, sometimes like women, and sometimes just as androgynous blahs. Women, same thing. They're trained to either be like men or just be androgynous, whatever, because that creates better slaves. If you have people who don't even know who they are or which way is up or down, they're much easier to control. So this is Marxism 101. This is exactly what they were trying to do with all that. So where did it go wrong? I mean, it's hard to say what exactly the tipping point was. I think it's just been a slow degradation where every aspect is piles on another. One particularly nasty ritual that is still done today that harms the masculine like no other is the satanic blood practice of circumcision. Mutilating a young boy's genitals. Like, that is just an initial, because the only way that this system is created and maintains as such is with trauma. It has to be. There's two driving forces within this space. One is fear and one is love. And fear needs trauma. So in order to create that fear system where a hierarchy exists and the control exists, you have to push trauma consistently, and they do consistently from the day we are pulled out of the womb. We're yanked out of there far too quickly. The umbilical cord is cut far too quickly. We're spanked. We're thrown onto a cold metal table under bright lights. We're taken away from our mother in those precious first few moments. And then we're injected with all sorts of poisons. But the males have that extra little fun bit of cutting off parts of the most painful thing you could possibly do to a child, and they do it. They mutilate the child, and then in that moment the father has to witness what they're supposed to be protecting, they let happen to them. They're witnessing that happen right in front of them. So they're in that moment acquiescing to the state and saying, I'm no longer a man. I no longer protect my family. I'm just going to bow just as I was treated. And so that continues. So that's one of many nasty little things they do to kind of strip away us from our inherent masculine protector role. But I think that's a huge one. It's a particularly nasty ritual that still goes on to this day. But I mean, I could go into many other ones. It's a compound issue. It's all about degrading, that pushing us into the porn industry. That's another hugely nasty dark spell that they do onto us, is teach us this unhealthy, have us have this unhealthy relationship with sex. Sex is this is all based off sex. This is the sacred sex. This is the sacred union between the masculine and the feminine, which is what created all of this. So sex is a beautiful, beautiful thing, but they teach the complete distorted way of it. So that not only do they shame you if you actually talk about it from a just curiosity perspective, they shame you. But then when you feel, because you're still curious about it, because we're wired to be curious about sex because it is everything. So when you're curious about it, then they lead you down these dark pathways of pornography. And then it's all about ejaculation and that kind of stuff too, which is another completely wrong way to go about, and it drains our life force energy, and this is um I don't know if this is introducing the topic to your viewers, but the sacred sex is all about semen retention. It's all
Yeah,
about not
masculine
spilling your seed
sex.
and not letting this beautiful life force drain from you, but actually go, regenerate within you and channel up within you. This is part of this physical ascension process that we can do with a partner. And these are higher levels. It's not something to just be taken lightly. And that's why sex is not something to be trifled with. It's not something to be flippant or casual with. It's a sacred bond. It's an absolutely sacred bond that needs to be preserved in that sort of space. But what do they teach? They teach us how to abuse, to view everyone as an item, just to get a short pleasure from, to be done with, to discard. And then all the same time, we're ejaculating all of our life force energy, which is killing us. It truly does kill us. I mean, anyone who looks into semen retention or any of that knows that the people who practice it, they experience the vitality of not spilling that. And people who do it regularly, it's the complete opposite. And just about every guy knows that, who has experienced that, because it's a deflating feeling. Anytime there is that outward ejaculation, it's death. So not only have they trained us to eat death by eating the flesh and the other animal bits and stuff that we eat, but they train us to ejaculate life. And that Santos Bonacci coined that one. They train us to eat death and ejaculate life, but it's completely distorting us, turning us into something that we don't even recognize. But that's another pretty nasty spell that they've put on us to try and take us away from our masculine self.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is a fascinating subject, and I heard it from Santos as well. Have you got, I'm sure that there's all the men here and the women are fascinated if it's the first time, they've sort of heard anyone speak of this subject. Have you got any more that you can expand on that? And where can men and women go for more information on that?
Well, I'm looking myself. If you can find some good sources, it's hard to find, and they've done a really good job at keeping us away from this fundamental aspect, this fundamental truth. You can find, there's a documentary called uh, I believe it's called Sex, the Garden of Eden, or something of that nature. But it goes into the sacred sex and just the story of Adam and Eve and what that was about, and potentially that was about the ejaculation, and that was the biting of the fruit, was this first time of spilling the seed and falling into that temptation of this continual degradation that we have. um, so that's an interesting way to look at it, but they go into it in more detail. They explain it quite well. It's a good introduction on the topic. As far as practices, I know that there are probably couples out there that would love to look into practices on how to participate in the sacred sex. And really, you can try and search for like white tantra. That's another way that it's usually often, white tantra is the same sort of practice of non-ejaculatory sexual relations. And but really, I think just having both partners being willing to just be with each other, and not get so tied up into how we do all this and what we need to do. And I'm sure there are breathing techniques and ways to get better at it. Um, but ultimately it's just truly being, going back to the first time you were hanging out with someone of the opposite sex, and just the flutters that you got when you're holding each other's hands or staring into each other's eyes or just being with them. Really really cherish those moments. And I think there's a natural progression that happens within that. I don't have a lot of experience myself physically, like that wasn't something I'd learned about back when I was in physical relationship. I've kind of abstained from that for the time being. It just hasn't naturally happened that way. So I don't have a lot of physical experience to share in that regard. There is one book that I read. I've read portions of it. It's called the Multi-Orgasmic Man. So that's another good one, that talks about how you can practice. And for guys, you can practice on your own too. It's more difficult, I think, to practice on your own, because you don't want to be going into the porn aspect where you're going for that stimulation and that self-pleasuring in that sort of way. But if you can really envision you're with your partner, the partner of your dreams, you can kind of facilitate that to some extent. But again, that's not something I have a lot of experience with. So that's kind of the gist of it. But ultimately, the sort of to give a summary of what is sacred sex, I mean, it's as simply that it's you're not ejaculating outwardly, especially, and it's easier to track as a man. You know, a woman might ask, well, what does that mean for me? You know, I don't really do that. It's the same energetic process. So energetically, we can either ejaculate outward or we can channel it inward. And so every time we're experimenting or we're going, especially from or any perspective, but approaching the orgasm. The orgasm is, I mean, that's the moment of life. You know, this is this beautiful moment where the male and the female come together. So the orgasm is definitely a beautiful aspect that should be encouraged and welcomed, but it's a different kind of orgasm in that when you're channeling it inward, it's more sustained and it lasts a lot longer. So and I've heard pretty spectacular experiences that people have had through these practices. For a man, it's easier to kind of track because obviously if you're ejaculating outward, you're not doing it correctly. And it's not something to shame yourself with. It does take practice and it does take that sort of willingness of your partner to be patient and to acknowledge what this is all about. But ultimately it's finding the way. I know your Kegel muscles or the muscles you use to kind of stop urinating. This is the same muscle that you can train, which is the same one to sort of redirect this, the semen. So from going outward to channeling upward, which is ultimately going up your spine. And so the further along we go up our spine with this semen retention, it goes through all the chakras and the goal is to get it here. So are you familiar with the Ankh, the symbol? It's a religious symbol. So that is actually representative of this sacred sex, because when you channel it upwardly correctly, it's supposed to create a loop out of us and then come back, you know, energetically. So when you have that activation, you feel it, and you should feel that loop coming around, and that's the regenerative. You know, so when you're outwardly ejaculating, it's just a quick burst that life goes nowhere, it's wasted. When you do it within, it activates so much of us, and it loops. So it creates that loop of perpetuity, so that you don't waste anything. It's just encouraging more and more growth. So that's kind of the gist of it, you know. And for females, it's the same thing, but a little bit harder to track. It's the same sort of visualization, you know, recognizing that it is this channel within, but it is a little bit more difficult to track as far as like, but from what I've heard, you know, when it happens, you know, when you have this experience, it's this absolute feeling of euphoria where both of you have completely lost yourselves within each other. You know, you have become one within that moment, and that's the magnificence that can come from it. Is you're simulating the unification process. So you're acknowledging duality. You're acknowledging that you're both there as a beautiful aspect of this duality, perfectly balanced with each other. And you find that perfect balance until you create that absolute perfect symbiosis, you know, the unification where two become one. So it's an incredible thing to get into, and it's a beautiful form of magic. You know, it truly is. It's magic. And so when we can activate this layer of ourselves too, you know, there is no limit whatsoever. So that's kind of my best take on it. I'm still learning a whole lot myself. I'm still eager to learn more, and I know this will be a conversation that we'll continually have as we go forward. And I'm more than happy to have that conversation as I learn more. But that's about as far as I can take you now.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. Great to get into that conversation. I was hoping that would come up with someone along the line. And of course, Santos Bonacci has got a bit on it too, but yeah, I don't know if he's got any specific shows on it or if it's just sort of come up intermittently throughout his stuff. Justin, we've got about half an hour left. So I know you've got a lot of stuff that probably I haven't touched on or opened up. So could you please take this time to talk about masculinity, men, whatever you feel is important to share in the energy of the show today?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. So I love calls to action, and I love like recognizing that we all have a huge role to play. And if you're sitting here listening to a show like this, that means you've done a lot of work to get here. You've done a whole heck of a lot of work to be able to hear a message coming through in a channel of this high frequency. Gemma has done a marvelous job at creating this space. So if you're listening, you're well on your way to being a leader within this space, because the more that we recognize that we are the ones we've been waiting for. We're not looking for some savior outside of ourselves. We're looking within to find that empowerment to step up and say, I got this. I can do it. I can't do everything, and I'm not supposed to do everything. God didn't ask us to save the world. God just asked us to focus on within and save ourselves so that we can, and then as a byproduct, we save the world in that space. As a byproduct, we very much do. Um, so yeah, that would be that's a good place to start, is just recognizing that we have to take responsibility for everything that we do, everything that we are, everything that we've created, everything that we have, every aspect of us. And truly, and this is masculine and feminine, it doesn't really matter, but I'd say even more so the masculine urgency of ensuring not only do we take responsibility, but everyone takes responsibility for what they've done. So this justice that is coming. This justice that's already happening. This righting of all these wrongs. So if there's any space within our lives where there's a wrong that needs to be righted, right it. If there's I know that there are lots of families where there are people out there who might have somebody in their family that sexually abuses somebody within their family, and they know about it. If you know about something like that, or if you know any wrong that's being committed and you haven't said something, at least just said something about it, then you're perpetuating that problem. You're saying, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with essentially whatever wrong to happen in the world. And just in case anyone isn't filled in on the depth of wrongness that's happening right now, we have children out there that are harvested for their blood and eaten. So if that's not about as bad as it can get, I don't know what is. But anytime we turn a blind eye to anything wrong, we're saying, I'm okay with that. We're saying, I'm okay with a world where that exists, where my children can be harvested and taken advantage of, where women can't feel safe going anywhere, where the elderly are taken advantage of and killed. That's the space that we're saying I'm okay with continuing if I allow any wrong to continue in front of me. And this goes all the way down to just little lies, just little moments where it's like, hey, that's not right. And it's not that we make a big scene or cause a big ruckus or whatever, but it's just do what needs to be done to address whatever it is at whatever capacity, at whatever level. And that's my call to any man out there, to step up and do what needs to be done, address these wrongs, address wherever you can, and do that within them. Make sure that your space is so safe, is so protected. Make sure that everyone within your realm, everyone within your sphere of influence feels that same safety and that protection wherever you go, so that the conversations can be had, so that the divine feminine can come out and feel safe to care and hold and cultivate and love all of this trauma, all of this hurt that we've had. We need her, but she has to feel safe to come out to do that. She can't come out and do her job until we do our job and make it safe. So let's work on making that space safe. Let's create these spaces where people can discuss and converse, and really model that within everything that you do. I love doing it online. I love creating a safe space of communication for everyone, no matter where you are. And I love having people step up who, might not have felt comfortable in any other space to do that. I get that a lot on my channel, a lot within, we have conversations all the time on my channel. And I love when people come up and say, I don't ever speak on anything before, but I felt comfortable doing it here. So I'd like to, I love that, because it's like, I'm doing my job. That's what I'm supposed to do. That's the masculine. That's the protector. That's creating that safe space so we can do all that. And, the term safe space has been kind of warped through the whole, it's not, yeah, I don't need to get into that, but I just mean safe spaces in like cultivating an area where we can all show up as we are and not fear being ridiculed or attacked or chastised in any capacity. So if anyone's out there doing that, if anyone is ridiculing others, or if anyone's chastising others or berating others or shaming others or guilty, whatever, that's where we need to address as well, and say, and draw it upon them, like, hey, why are you doing that? Why are you coming after this person just for speaking up, just for being honest about what they had to say, just for sharing their perspective? Why are you going up? Why are you fighting them? Why are you beating them up because of this? That question never gets asked. And so those people get away with it. These people get away with beating each other down. And yes, don't don't judge them, because they likely were products of the same behavior. These trauma cycles do repeat. So don't come at them with any sort of viciousness or any sort of anger, but just with the necessary action to say, hey, that shit that you're doing, it's not okay. It's not okay to treat people like that. It's not okay to speak to people like that. It's not okay to address people like that. Um, and I'm not going to stand for it. So if you're going to keep doing it, then I'm going to keep addressing it, and you're going to get embarrassed because I'm going to keep addressing it. And that's really all it takes. All shining light on anything is just talking about it, just shining the light on it. Just say, hey, you can be an asshole all you want, but I'm going to point the light on you and I'm going to show you where you're being an asshole and how you're being an asshole and who you're being an asshole to. And if you want to continue operating as such, then okay, we'll treat you as such, but just leaving it at that and making sure that there's no stone unturned. There's no, I get really, I get really frustrated, or not frustrated, but I find a call to move when people are talking trash about each other behind their backs or saying something about somebody else. I really, and so people don't really do it in front of me anymore because I always address it. But if people are talking about anybody, I say, okay, so I'm going to go to this person and tell them all that you're saying. I'd really love you to do it. I really love you to go and address all the things that you're saying of these problems that you have with them, so we can come to some sort of resolution, because this does nothing. You talking badly about somebody, this does absolutely nothing. We're not helping anybody. You're creating stories based on stuff that may or may not have happened. They're going to have some reaction to your response to this fabricated reality that you've created, and it's just going to create more problems. So let's not do that anymore. Let's go address this. And so, it's brought up some fun situations. And like I said, sometimes people just don't really talk about that in front of me anymore, but that's okay too. But just being that shining example in each and every opportunity, and recognizing that, while we're not fighting a war as we've been conditioned to think that war needs to be fought, we are very much fighting a war because it's a war in our mind. It's a war for our minds. It's left brain, right brain. And anytime someone is consumed by this vicious energy where they can take advantage of somebody, where they can harm somebody, where they can come at somebody with anger or call somebody names or be mean to somebody, anytime somebody's in that space, they are so focused, they're so attached to the separation, they're so attached to this egotistical identity that they're willing to hurt somebody else. That's the left brain. That's the ego. When somebody's in that space, I'm not saying that they are the enemy, but they are consumed by the enemy. And it's not necessarily like it's a part of us, it's us. But when it takes over, it's a possession, it's a demonic possession of sorts. People are not in, you're not in your right minds because you're willing to do anything to get what you want. You're so self-serving in that space that you can justify any action, anything said. And so if somebody reveals to me that they're in that space, then I need to treat them as if they're, until they choose to come out of it and until they choose to get back in their right mind, then they are, they have to be treated differently. And it becomes almost like the art of war in that sort of aspect, where I need to recognize that that person is not in their right mind. I cannot trust them in that space. And so therefore I have to treat them differently until they recognize that they are in that parasitical aspect and step out of it. But if we don't set up those barriers, if we don't enforce those consequences, if we don't boundaries, if we don't have those boundaries, and we don't enforce the our sovereign boundaries of our own personal space, of our family space, of those we cherish and love around us, our community, if we don't establish those boundaries and enforce them, then we're apt to get run all over, and our kids are just going to get taken advantage of again. So this has to be just a consistent practice of just recognizing, okay, where are my boundaries? Who am I? Start with that. What am I doing? Am I oriented correctly? Am I in my right mind? That's a good place to start. Really check in with yourself. Make sure that you are. Not that you can really, it's not something to think about necessarily, because it's just a natural state to be in flow with God. But if you catch yourself in a lot of thought, if you catch yourself, that's why learning the virtues and the sins and their opposite extremes is really helpful, because then you can kind of see, okay, every aspect within me is kind of one of those things. There's 7 or 14 or 21, depending on how you want to look at it. um uh and this would be a lot to get into as well, but those are kind of like the the characters that play within our reality, and they all exist in our mind. So when these voices that we hear people playing, and we can have a dialogue with them, but don't attach yourself to them, because they're all just existing to add texture to this experience, so that we can utilize them when we need to, but they're not us. That's not me. The voices in your head are not you. You're the observer of those voices. You are outside of that, so you can have experiences with them, but you're not them. So don't attach yourself to them. So I guess all that to say, just anytime we find ourselves in that thought space where I'm identifying attached to this way of thinking, where I'm always thinking, I'm always plotting, planning, I'm not in that flow, and I'm apt to do anything outside of that space. So check there first. Make sure I'm in the here and now. I'm not lost in thought. I'm here now. I'm present. And when we're within that space, then we can start to be aware of where other people are, of where other people might exist. Is this pattern of behavior, is this go with someone who's in their right mind, who's operating with this recognition of service to all, myself included within that service to all, but service to all? Or is this person only looking out for their own self-interest? Are they very transactional with how they relate with people? That's an easy way to sort of identify, is if they only do things with people they have some perceived sense of value with.
Yeah.
They're trying to get something out of it. They view people as items. That's an easy thing to sort of be wary of. And when somebody reveals that they're in that space, you need to be wary around them and be willing to confront them if they step outside of those boundaries. Until we've all kind of done a lot of work in that space, the masculine within us, and the masculine manifests physically, we need to take that stance and say, no, no, nope, nope. We're not going to put up with that. I'm not going to put up with your insanity. I'm not going to put up with your madness. You might have gotten away with it up to this point, but no more, no more, no mas. So that would be the challenge I'd give to all the men out there, and anyone really, anyone embodying that masculine side. It's the protector. If there's not that sense of safety, then something's wrong. Something needs to be addressed, and we're the ones to do it. So let's do it.
Yeah, imagine if all men, rose to embody those qualities. We wouldn't have anyone, feeling unsafe in the world today.
Yeah, truly. Yeah, it'd be magical. I mean, it is magical, and it will be continually more magical as we step into this. We just forgot, and so there's no shame. Don't be ashamed for how we got here. Don't feel guilty because we got to this space, but we did. We got to this space. So let's look at it honestly, and let's see what we need to do to get out of it. And it just means, just these simple little switches here and there. It's challenging. It's hard. It's not easy, but it's not supposed to be easy. And that's where, that other beautiful aspect of the masculine is sort of that almost kind of like insane way to blaze trails, that pioneer aspect. That's another healthy masculine aspect of just saying, I don't know what's over there. It's a complete mystery. I have no idea, but I'm going. We'll see. We'll find out. And so when we can really take that pioneer role and say, hey, we're going where no one's been before, but it's going to be awesome, and we're going to do it really, really well, because we have nothing to fear. There truly is nothing to fear. So
Justin, where does does the heart come into all this?
Well, it's the balance point. It's heart and mind. It has to be these are the two. I had a visualization the other day of that triangle that appears when you have the mind and the heart, and then they create that point, and that's connecting to God. So we have to have both in balance. Otherwise, that connection is not there. We're not operating in our fullest, because eh, if we're stuck in our mind and everything's logical, everything's very robotic, and you have to prove everything, and it's helpful to do that, and it's a tool. It's helpful to have that balance. But if you're stuck in that and you're not in your heart space, you don't acknowledge your feelings, you don't acknowledge your emotions, then it becomes this sort of robotic way of being, and we just end up being very repetitive and boring, and we end up self-destructing at that point too, because we can't create anything when we're in that logical space. Whereas the heart, that's where the creative flow comes from. That's where those emotions truly can imbue with us when we feel everything so powerfully. But just the same, if we're stuck in that heart space and we don't have the minds, then we're apt to just wave and go all over the place. We have no grounding. We have no substance. There's no structure to it. So having both of them working in tandem and balance is absolutely essential in order to create most abundantly, most creatively. So yeah, that's the heart and the mind. They have to be in balance, otherwise it doesn't work.
So, I mean, I know there's so much more we could talk about, but if you had to choose the biggest change or the biggest practice you introduced into your life to be in this state of, balance now, what would you say it was?
Wow, practice. Well, hmm, yeah, I mean it really is start I mean it sounds simple, but one really helpful aspect is just starting each day with gratitude. It really is, like, it sounds cheesy, and you hear people talk about it and they're like whatever, but if you start with that gratitude and really really mean it, like, not just, oh, I'm grateful, blah blah blah, and don't just read mantras or read some repetitive list that you have, but really really recognize that, like, holy shit, I woke up today. Like, I get another chance to do this again. I get a whole nother opportunity to create an extravagant experience, a whole opportunity to do it all over again. So everything else that happens is a complete bonus. It's just more benefit of being here and experiencing this, even if it is like going back to that, even if it is that intense sadness or sorrow or whatever it is, even if it's in those moments, still having gratitude for the chance to experience that, because it's everything. So that's a big thing that's helped me kind of stay centered, stay in that space, stay always appreciative, because when you're in gratitude, it's kind of like a cheat code to always be present, because when you're gracious about everything that you have, you're not thinking about what you might have in the future or what you used to have. You're like, no, I'm right here right now. So it's just another way to stay present. And then that's really the secret to it all. Like, just continually find ways to be present. Find those moments where you can sit still and just observe everything around you. Feel the out in nature is truly the best place to do it. And that's where anyone who needs extra grounding, or just people in general, should spend lots of time in nature and feel the wind on your skin, or listen to the birds singing, or any aspect. All of those are just very helpful to bring us back to that present moment, which is the only space that God can truly work through us in that best way possible. So when we're there, he does, and when we're not, he doesn't, and we toil and struggle and challenge ourselves in all sorts of different ways. But staying present, being gracious for that is a great tip. And then you can talk about breathing, which is another big aspect of it as well. It's not breathing isn't something I've really gotten um into different types of breath, but just really making sure I'm breathing. That it's really quite simple too. We get stuck in this, like, oh wait, I don't even remember the last time I took a breath. Let me do that. Let me take a few big ones right now. And this is just such a it's completely free. No one has to go anywhere. You don't have to do anything. So that's what I challenge anyone who comes to me, because I love helping people. I really do. I love helping people shine. I love seeing people figure out that they were the ones causing all the problems that they were facing, and then unlocking those problems and soaring to new heights. I love that. um, but I'll often say, in those moments where it feels like everything is like, the walls are closing in around me, and I don't know what to do. I can't figure anything out. It feels like everything's working against me. Well, just stop. Just stop and breathe, because if I can do nothing else, I can always breathe. So I don't need to focus on anything. I'll just stop. Take three deep breaths. And if three doesn't get you back to that space of balance, take six. And if six doesn't, take nine. And if that doesn't, take more. There's no amount that you can do where you can't overdose on breath. And every time you do it, it's just going to add to that and help you find that space and find that calmness and find that assurance, that contentment, like you said, that I'm okay, like this is all right, even if it is uncomfortable, even if I might not like some things that are happening. I'm okay, like I'm here, I'm good, I got this. And coming from that space, then you can achieve anything. There is no limitation anymore, and you got everything. So those would be some kind of helpful tips. And of course, I could continue onward. We could go into lots more, but I'll leave
Yeah.
it at that as far as just some helpful tips.
Well, I love the gratitude one because as well, and I always say, being grateful for what we have today always creates more to be grateful for tomorrow, because our todays create our tomorrows. But Justin, I know you're very big on health, food, diet, fasting, all that stuff. And we really don't have time to get into it today. In fact, I'm thinking I'll invite you on for another show where we can talk specifically about that. And I know you run some great chats on Telegram. But if you could encapsulate the importance of diet, food intake, however you want to phrase it, in 5, maybe 10 minutes at the most,
Yeah.
what would you say about it?
Well, it's another hugely important aspect to really draw upon and look at. And it often is the area of our life where people are least wanting to look at and do anything about. Because the conditioning of the world, as I mentioned, is all about disconnection. And so they've lied to us about everything, every little aspect, and that includes the food as well. So they've trained us how to eat incorrectly, how to breathe incorrectly, how to drink incorrectly. But with food specifically, it, it really is, it's all about the accumulation of, we are the accumulation of frequencies that we input. um so I'll say that again. We are all frequencies accumulated into wherever we land. This is the addition or subtraction or whatever of the frequencies that we're bringing into this space. So these are the thoughts that we have, the people that we interact with, the environment that we're in, the food we eat, the water we drink, the breath we take. Everything is a factor into this overall frequency that we're going to walk at and be at. And we have the utmost power to influence every aspect of that, to change it and to modify it. And that's the goal. That's the path. That's the way, is finding ways to optimize those frequencies and go higher and higher and higher. And he always gives us that path. We just sometimes fall off of it. So we're always on it naturally, but sometimes through temptations, through our desires, we can fall off this path. So with the food specifically, uh, it's important to really have this baseline. If you don't feel well, if you don't feel healthy, if you're always in pain, if we're always inflamed, if we're always getting sick, if we're, always experiencing these troubles, how can we ever sit still and actually let God do what he needs to do? We can't. We're always distracted. We're always thinking about food. We're always, wanting to do this or that. We're always looking for some sensation to fall into or to do. But the truth is that God God gave us everything that we needed when we were brought here, and he gave us perfection as far as what we needed to eat. And it doesn't come from animals. It doesn't come from any living thing that doesn't want to be gifted. What he gave us were these plants that continually give us life-giving food, this life essence essentially sunlight captured into this space. That's what fruit is essentially. It's this captured sunlight that we can then nourish ourselves with and continue walking in this physical plane, in abundance. But everything that society teaches us to eat makes us heavy. Adds a lot of toil. It adds a lot of inflammation. It makes us struggle when we consume it. So we're always distracted by digestion, and we can get into a lot of details on it, but essentially the way that we eat now, most people are literally full of shit, and we have the tens 10, 20, sometimes more pounds of accumulated toxic waste within our intestines. That's just the accumulation of this way of eating, where we're eating the processed foods, we're eating the animal products, we're eating all these really dense forms of foods that are very hard to digest and very hard to get rid of. They don't convert to fuel. They don't convert to fuel very easily. Therefore, we get bogged down quite a bit. So to reverse that, it's all about lightness. It's all about shifting away from acidity to alkalinity. So, and I struggle to find like the ways to get into all of this without getting too deep. But essentially, alkalinity is when our body is in balance. It's when our body is in this ease where everything is flowing. Everything needs to flow. Hydration is very important. Water is very important. Water carries energy. Water transmits all the energy, all the information through our body. It helps to get rid of toxins. It helps to get rid of these accumulations. So if our body's not in flow, if our body's not flowing, then we can't be in the divine flow either. It works both ways. So our body has to be flowing, and this is through alkalinity. Alkalinity is achieved through ease of digestion, ease on the body. The easiest things to digest are the simplest forms of the one source of fuel that our body is actually looking for, which is glucose. Glucose is the simple sugar found in all fruits and vegetables, and so this is what we're designed to eat. We're frugivores by nature. You can look at our skeletal structure. Frugivore is not a term that's often used, but we're frugivores by structure. Our intestines, our teeth, everything is designed as a frugivore. They eat fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds, but primarily fruits. And so this is the optimum form of fuel for us. So anything we step away from that, it's just bogging us down with additional weight, with additional baggage to have to carry. And then we don't have any time for this spiritual progression. We don't have any time to worry about anything else. We're always just focused on that. And it introduces a whole host of other problems. The cancer is a hoax. That's all made up. It's just acidity accumulated in different areas of the body. Acidity is caused by these foods that are very difficult to process. They add a lot of toxins. And so the more that we have that way, then we're always led to death. And it is this fundamental decision between life and death. It's a split choice in the duality, and we always have whichever completely available to us. But if we want to experience life, everlasting life, there's no need for cells to die. Scientists have no idea why cells would ever possibly die on their own, because they are perfect. They are perfectly regenerative on their own. And when our body is acting in its perfect way, everything regenerates 100% of the time. All of it, every aspect. There's nothing that doesn't regenerate. There's nothing that cannot be regenerated after the fact either. This is we are miraculous in this space. But we have to clear all the gunk and junk and stuff away that's keeping our body from doing what it needs to do. And you mentioned fasting. So the fastest way to get to this space of purity is through fasting. So anyone who wants to kind of elevate and look more into this, and I'm not recommending anybody jump right into whatever, do your research, because it is a heavy task to come from a standard everything diet that we've been conditioned to moving into this higher vibrational food space. It takes work, it takes dedication, it takes diligence. Anyone who I know it, I still struggle with it. I still have a hard time dealing with certain aspects of it, but I know that the more I dive into that more holistically, the better I feel and the more connected I feel. And so everything, the rewards truly are built into it. You don't have to listen to me or anybody on the topic. You just have to start experimenting, playing with it yourself, seeing what it's like when you go a few days. If anyone can do a few day water fast, like that's something that is a really, really powerful tool. Even if it's just one day where it's one day I'm not going to eat anything and I'm just going to drink water, try it. Or if you really struggle with that, then do lemon water. That helps to kind of take the hunger pains quite a bit, but you're still getting that cleansing. But really diving deep into just water fasting, you're giving your body that perfect time to address what it needs to. Then and all we have to do is just observe nature to see that this is what the animal kingdom does as well. When it is sick, it fasts. We've been conditioned to think you got to eat all this stuff and take all these medicines whenever we're sick. No, the wrong way. Wrong once again, lied once again. So fasting is another powerful tool to kind of get back to that space of purity and really recalibrate our relationship with food and these sensations. And we can get into parasites and that kind of stuff too. We're full of parasites. We're full of shit and we're full of parasites. So we've got a lot of work to do to address all that space. But the more that we keep having these kind of conversations and learning and growing together and being authentic and vulnerable and and being okay with like not being perfect, and not comparing ourselves to others as well. This is all our own journey to see where we are and what do we want to do? Do you want to feel better? Do you want to stop dying? I do. So I'm going to do that. And if you want to join, then come along.
Oh, I love that. And yeah, I'm really super keen to have you back to do a show. And I'm also, on the health journey as well. So I've got lots of questions and I'm sure, it will unfold naturally as it happens. So we'll do that soon because I know
Yeah,
Justin's
absolutely.
already agreed. So thank you. So where can people find you, Justin? And yeah, your Telegram chats are great. I mean, they're 3 o'clock in the morning my time, but often I'll wake up and I'll look at my phone and there's a notification that one's on. So I put it on. I usually fall back to sleep, but then I'll listen to it the next day because you do a recording and you put it up for those of us that didn't hear it all.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for that. And they are really great conversations. And I love just facilitating that space of where anyone can come on and ask any questions. That's one thing. On most of my shows, I don't typically have a major topic to get into. I just love open Q&A because that really allows God to move through whomever to inspire them to ask the question that probably a lot of other people are having. And I know from experience that people have those and they're like, hey, that all my questions were asked. And so I just had to listen. So it creates that beautiful opportunity. So I love doing that. On Telegram, you can find me on my channel. It's the channel's display is called Justin Carpenter, but you can find it if you type in at Justin Carpenter 33, all one word, Justin Carpenter 33, all one word. That's my channel. If you want to message me directly on Telegram, it's at Justin Carpenter, all one word. You can find these links on my website, and that's another great space to reach me and to find a lot of my content, justincarpenter.org. That's justincarpenter.org. You can find my contact information. You can find my links page, which links to my Telegram channel and lots of other good things too. Um, so that's probably the best space to reach me. Telegram's usually the easiest space to message me to get response fastest, but email me on my website too. I'll definitely get back to you. And I love connecting. So if anyone's eager to connect and find things, and I'll invite you to the spaces where we have these conversations and help answer your questions in any particular way. As long as people are eager and willing and wanting to learn, I'm eager and willing and wanting to share and help and facilitate that in the best way possible. So yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, and I'll drop all the links below in the description. And I'll just add a little thing. They say you become like the five people you spend the most time with. I found that, now, especially maybe the last couple of months when I've sort of, accentuated my health and, really trying to eat the fruit and the really healthy diet, listening to shows like yours and just surrounding myself with websites and programs that are into this just reinforces it, and it's just so easy when you are surrounded by it all the time. So it's a little hack, I'd say. Even if you don't go in with the intention to change anything, once you start listening to this, your body's like, oh yeah, do that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's simple, subtle things that we can shift right away that have astronomical effects on us, And one challenge I'd give to anybody is just no matter where you are with the diet, look at getting rid of processed foods. If that's your first and foremost, everyone can agree that processed foods are no good for us. all these strange chemicals and ingredient lists. They're designed to kill us. So get that through your head. They were designed to kill us. So if we keep eating them, we're saying, hey, I'm okay with, eating poison and dying. So let's stop eating that kind of stuff, and we'll eventually, as we recognize these poisons, they will move away from the sphere of influence where we won't have access to them as easily anymore. But until then, we have to make a definitive choice to say, I'm not going to eat poison anymore.
Yeah.
So that would be something where anyone could start with.
Love it. Love it. Well, thank you so much, Justin. Fantastic show. We covered so much. So really appreciative of your time and your knowledge and wisdom. Thank you.
Oh, no problem, Gemma. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. And for anyone out there, thanks for watching, and for everyone out there, I should say. And if you could share the show, subscribe, and I'll let you know when we have another show with Justin, where we'll focus purely on the diet and the fasting and the health aspects. So I'll be back in a few days with another episode of Heart Warriors. Until then, bye.